Okay, next up we're going to string a Tecnifibre T-Flash 300, and this is the CES version, which I believe is the latest update on the T-Flash 300. It's a 16 by 19 pattern. The mains start at the throat. That means the mains are going to end at the throat. Tecnifibre frames are really nice that they have these eyelets where your tie-offs are, so your tie-offs are actually marked already, and it creates a really nice protection for the frame where the knots are going to go, so the knots don't crush the grommet in the traditional way that most frames the grommet has to deform to the shape of the knot. So all the other manufacturers could take a nice page from the book of Tecnifibre and use I'm sure it's copyrighted or trademarked and they can't use it, but it would be great if all rackets used these little grommets where the tie-offs were to protect the grommets. So you shouldn't have to replace a grommet strip on these types of rackets because of deformed or split grommets at your tie-off locations. You probably would only have to replace your grommets and your bumper guard from a worn bumper. It's really nice. At any rate, it's a 16 by 19 pattern. The mains start at the throat, they'll end at the throat. So if you're stringing it one piece, consider an around the world pattern so that you're not installing your crosses bottom up. We're going to be doing a hybrid today, so this is going to be Babala natural gut in the mains at 56 pounds plus 10% pre-stretch, and co-poly in the crosses at 50 pounds with no pre-stretch. So I've already taken the gut out and measured off. I'm using 19 feet from this set for the mains. Any overage that I might have that extends past the edge of the gripper, I'll comment on that as I always do. And I'm going to cut 18 feet of co-poly from the reel for the 19 crosses here. So let me get I already have the gut, and I also did a manual pre-stretch on the gut just to remove most of the coil memory so it's a little easier to work with during the stringing process. So let's measure off the polyester from the reel so that we have that ready for our crosses when we need it. And I'm going to use 18 feet as I said, which would be 8 racket lengths, because this racket is 27 inches. Whenever I say racket lengths, I'm always talking about 27 inches. So if the racket happened to be a little shorter or a little longer, I always use a tape measure and take note of where 27 falls over here, because it could be a little this side, a little that side, depending on the actual length of the frame. So I'm basically just using the frame as a 27-inch indicator. So right about there is 27 inches, because this frame actually is 27 inches. So 8 racket lengths will be the 18 feet that I'm going to use. And that's 8 right there. I'm not saying that you would necessarily use 18 feet because a lot of that is dictated by the type of machine that you're using and how far away your tension head is, specifically how far away the back edge of your gripper is from the edge of the frame when you're tensioning your last mains or your top cross or your bottom cross. And with my machine, it's only about 12 inches from the edge of the frame to the back edge of my gripper. So I know that 18 feet will be enough. We'll put that to the side for the moment. And yes, this is a brand new frame. The plastic's still on the handle. People do bring me brand new rackets instead of having them strung at the places that they're purchased. They know that I'm going to do a better job than the place that they bought the racket from. So it's not unusual for that to happen. So being that this is a brand new racket, anytime you're stringing a brand new frame or a frame that you just replaced the grommets on, you want to take a little additional care when you're stringing to make sure that the grommets are seated properly, since they've never had any strings run through them and none of them are bent in their correct orientation. So you just want to make sure that as you go along that all of your grommets, because sometimes the grommets will want to actually be pulled out. The tension head, as it's tensioning the string, will sometimes pull the grommets out, especially the very first grommet that is not inside the throat. So for example, this racket has 6 holes in the throat, which means 1, 2, 3 on each side, and then the 4th one on the left and the right. So the 4th grommet will be the first one in this part of the grommet strip that exits, and so that one will tend to get pulled out. Bobble-off frames, when they're brand new, that grommet wants to pull out, so you have to hold that in with your thumb or your fingers there. In other words, just be careful, just pay attention to what's going on. So we've got our poly measured off. We've got 19 feet of gut here, and I've already set the machine up for 56 pounds for the mains plus 10% pre-stretch. So let's get started on the mains. And with gut, you have to be especially careful as you're stringing it to make sure that you don't get any kinks or bends in the string. And the number one place that'll tend to happen is over here where this loop is approaching the frame as you pull string through. So every time you're pulling string through the racket, you want to have your eyes over at the opposite side, making sure that none of this is getting tangled or kinked. And that goes all the way through the stringing process, not just when you're starting the mains like I am now. And I should also mention that before you string, and you should be watching for those kinks on every string, not just gut, but it's especially important on gut to not kink it, not step on it, don't get any extra bends in it because it weakens the string. But you really don't want to be doing that even with polyester or synthetic gut. It's just good practice to always be making sure that you don't have any kinks anywhere. But every time you're stringing a racket with gut, at least I do, I always clean my rails, my clamps, my starting clamps, my gripper, everything that's going to touch the string. I want to make sure it's absolutely as clean as possible so that there's no chance of anything slipping. Because if you have dirty clamps, that's the number one thing that'll cause your string to slip. So clean your clamps, and don't forget to clean your gripper and your starting clamp if you have one, and your bases, your clamp bases and your rails, and all that stuff where basically any sliding or slipping could occur. So let's get started here. 56 pounds, 10% pre-stretch. And as always, you want your clamps adjusted tight enough, but not too tight. You don't want to crush or damage the string. And if your clamps have just been cleaned, it shouldn't require a lot of pressure to hold the string. If you have good quality clamps and they're clean, you don't need to be over tightening them. So again, make sure that there's no kinks or bends in the string as you pull this loop closed. And now this will be the very first pull outside of the throat, so as I apply tension to this string, I want to make sure that the grommets don't try to pull out. Same thing on the other side. Hold that in with my thumb. And before we start blocking any holes, I'm going to go ahead and pre-weave my crosses, the top 3 crosses, so I don't have to worry about blocked holes or any damage and friction on the gut. So this is the 3rd cross that I'm actually weaving. The skips on this racket are 7 and 9 at the head and 7 and 9 at the throat, so it is fairly symmetrical. So these are actually, I'm installing the 3rd cross, which would be, let's see, 6, that's 7 is going to be the top cross, 9 is the 2nd cross. These 2 are mains, so down here is, I guess it's 11 head. So I weave these in reverse order, the 3rd, then the 2nd, and then the 1st. so that I don't have to drag all the string through the mains more than necessary. Very little string gets pulled through this way. And now I can resume the mains and not have to worry about all these blocked holes or potential holes that would have potentially been blocked. And so that I don't have blocked holes later at the bottom of the frame when I install the bottom cross and second from bottom cross, that's what I'm going to put these ribbons in here for. But you can use scrap pieces of string to do that too. And so that I don't have any crossovers, I just keep routing the main strings, in this case the gut, below any loops of black string on the outside of the frame. In other words, if you were to look at the outer edge of the frame now or when it's complete, the black string, which are the crosses, the loops on the outside of the frame will always be above the loops of light colored string or the gut. So in other words, the mains stay low and then the crosses will be high, if that makes any sense. So this final main here on this side of the frame is extending. If I do not go around the Diablo, I can go to the back of the gripper and I still have 5 inches extra there. And if I have 5 extra inches, that means I have enough to go around the Diablo because that only uses up 3. Same thing, here's a black loop of string, so I want to make sure this gut stays underneath it. And I should have 5 inches on this side as well. And I do. So once again, I'll actually use the Diablo. And now when I tie off these mains, here at 8 throat where the eyelet is. I will also be creating a blocked hole here at 9 throat, so before I actually tighten this loop I'll put another ribbon here as well. If you have a nice sharp point on the ends of your strings, it'll go through these sorts of tie-offs. Because this particular tie-off here, when you're tying off on the next main over, that main is actually running diagonally through that hole. It's sort of making an S turn. In other words, the main string isn't hugging the wall of the grommet. You don't have a big opening like you would if it was maybe the second main. Some rackets you tie off on the very next main like this one. Some rackets you tie off 2 mains away. And in that case, this main string is hugging the wall of that grommet, and this string would pass easily through there. But when you're tying off just 1 main away, such as this racket, that string is running diagonally through the grommet and gives you a little bit more resistance. So it's kind of more important in these sorts of cases to make sure that you put a pointy tip on the end of your string if you don't already have one. And I'm actually going to flatten the end of this string with my starting clamp, and then cut a nice sharp angle as well. And now hopefully it finds its way through easier than before. Because with a soft string, like a soft multi-filament or a natural gut like this, you can't just push on it really hard. It's going to buckle, it's going to bend, and it's not going to want to go through there. So a little forethought and a little care, and sort of work smarter, not harder, by actually passing those through with by flattening the tips or cutting really, really sharp points on there if you haven't already. So now I'm going to use 2 more ribbons so that when these tie-offs here don't create a blocked hole for my 18th cross, my second from bottom cross. I've already got the ribbons in place that'll help me with the bottom cross, but these are here solely to pull that string down when I put in the second from bottom cross, or penultimate cross. And normally I use a starting clamp to tie my knots. These are Parnell knots that I'm using. I almost always use a Parnell knot. And but with gut I just tie it by hand so that I don't risk breaking it at the knot. If you're gentle, you could still use a starting clamp. I've done that before because I was on autopilot. But when I'm actually thinking about it, I just tighten the knot hand tight with the gut. And so now we can start tensioning the crosses. Change our tension from the 50, turn the pre-stretch off and change the tension to 50 pounds for our crosses. And since our polyester crosses is 18 gauge, we'll be needing to make a small adjustment on the clamps to tighten them up so that it holds this very, very thin polyester. So we're ready to do 50 pounds on our crosses. Now this second cross that I'm about to pull this loop closed, because of the path that the mains take through the frame, this string is rubbing against the loop of main, the gut, on the outside of the frame over here. So if you could see right here, if you could get down at eye level, there's going to be a friction point here where you've got the loop of gut, which of course is stationary, and now you're pulling this polyester across there. So to minimize that wear and tear, I want to pull this through as slowly and as carefully as I can to minimize the wear. I don't want to pull this very fast, especially with gut being there. So I'm making sure that this loop doesn't have any twists in it and that I pull nice and slow. All the other grommets, other than when I get down here, won't have this friction issue, so you don't have to take the extra care. Say for example here, this is not rubbing on anything. The third cross is very loose. But the second cross I always take a little extra care because there's a little more friction involved. And so now before I tension the third cross, I'll go ahead and install the fourth cross so that I'm now weaving one ahead. This also reduces the friction on the mains as well as the crosses too. So you got less wear and tear all the way around if you just weave one ahead. Even if you aren't stringing gut. I've got a little bit of a tangle here. Just want to make sure I get that cleared up. So now we'll tension our third cross. And as far as when to go back and retension your top cross to get your starting clamp off, you can do that anytime you have an odd numbered cross tension, because every time the odd numbered crosses are tensioned, it's this clamp, your machine clamp on this side, opposite of where the starting clamp is, that would be maintaining tension. So right now, that's an even numbered cross. So for example, after I pull this string through and tension this cross, I don't know what number it is, but I do know that it's odd because this clamp is on the opposite side from where the starting clamp is, and obviously something has to, the last tension string must maintain the tension. The machine clamp must be on the last string on this side for you to have this machine clamp free to go up here and get the starting clamp off. So for example, if I wanted to, I'll just wait till I get to the end or nearly to the end to do that. But if one is so inclined, as soon as you have this clamp here on the third cross, you could then go back and this clamp would be free to move from the second back to the first if you wanted to do it that early. Or any time as you get down the frame when this machine clamp has the tension of the last tension string, it would allow this one to be freed up. So for example, after I tension this string right here and get this clamp moved to it, that's now maintaining the tension in the string bed. This one over here is actually no longer doing anything, so it's free now. If I wanted to come up here and retension the top cross, I could do that. So some people get the starting clamp off quite early in the process. Some people wait till the end. I generally wait till the end. The one time I would say it really doesn't matter, other than some people are paranoid that they're going to bump it or a loop of string is going to get caught on it. Some people just don't like it sitting up there, they're nervous. I never have a problem with it. The one time I would say it might actually make a difference in regards to how long that's sitting on there is when your crosses are, now this is a polyester cross so it doesn't matter, it's very durable, but if your crosses are a very soft string, a very soft multi-filament, or if the crosses were gut, you wouldn't want that starting clamp sitting up on there, or Ashaway ZX, Monogut ZX is a very soft string. You really don't even want to use a starting clamp on it at all. So the point is if that's a soft string where sitting there for a long duration with the clamp pressing on the string might flatten the string or damage the string or crush the string, you wouldn't want to leave it up there for a long time. So you might want to do just the first initial crosses and get that off of there as soon as possible. But other than an instant like that, I don't see any harm in leaving it up there for the full duration till I get down towards the bottom. So I'm almost to the point where my cross string is too short to continue stringing one ahead. I think I'll be able to do one more, and then they'll no longer be we'll no longer have enough string to string one ahead and have a loop available to reach the tension head as well. In fact, this one might not even make it all the way across. Yep, just enough. So this one won't be able to go all the way across, but I can weave it a little bit. Even if you can only go part of the way across, it'll still be helpful than, rather than not doing any of it. So whatever you can weave one ahead, you should. And now I've got the last two crosses to deal with, but that'll be easy. So I won't have any blocked holes because I placed these ribbons here ahead of time. So if I lock my turntable and pull down on this ribbon, it'll open that right up, and I don't have a blocked hole to contend with. And I have my bottom cross. There is 4.5 inches extending past the back of the gripper. So The next time I string this frame the same way, I could cut this the cross string 4.5 inches less than the 18 feet that I cut from the reel. And we tie off up here on 10 throat, where that plastic eyelet is. And the only thing a little nerve-wracking here is I'm now trying to push a piece of sharp poly through a hole that has gut in it, so I want to be very careful. And make sure that I'm not encountering a bunch of resistance, and I don't want to force it through. I want it to slowly slide through, nice and easy. So as to not damage the gut. And again, we'll use a Parnell knot. So now I have 2 starting clamps, so I can use a second starting clamp to tighten this knot. And then I can go and get that. But if you only have 1 starting clamp, and I'll show you what to do if you don't have it. Since this is the 19th cross, which is, as I mentioned before, an odd number cross. Anytime you have an odd number cross clamped off like this one is free to come up here anytime you want. So if I just pause here and I don't finish tightening that, I can come back up to the top of the frame and tension the top cross. A lot of people, when they retension their top cross, immediately take the starting clamp off, like right now. I advise you to go ahead and get your machine clamp on there and in place. There's no advantage. You don't get any benefit by removing the starting clamp and then moving the machine clamp into place. If you put the machine clamp in place and lock it, then remove the starting clamp, you're safeguarded in case the string should jump out of the gripper over here. And right now I'm not going around my Diablo, so my string is entering the gripper or exiting the gripper, whichever way you want to look at it, at an angle. And I have had occasions sometimes, especially depending on how I had the gripper adjusted, where that string might slip out. And so if that pops out, as long as my starting clamp was still in place while I'm moving the machine clamp, I don't lose my tension. So that's an extra safeguard. So I always recommend you put the machine clamp on, lock it, then remove the starting clamp. There's no benefit to doing it the opposite way. So this gets tied off up here at 5 head. Again, there's a special tie-off eyelet at that location, so it's very easy with these frames. And this is again a Parnell knot. So that freed up my starting clamp. So if you only had 1 starting clamp, this would be the step-by-step process. So you come back up here, tie off your top cross, presuming you didn't use a starting knot. And then you've got your starting clamp free to come down here and tighten your bottom cross. So we'll snip off our tails. We'll make sure none of our tails are sharp. So that no one cuts their hand or slices the lining open on the inside of their tennis bag as they're putting a racket away or getting one out of their bag. I'm just using the round back side of my bent nose, needle nose pliers to take the sharp edge off of particularly the poly, but I do it to all the knots. Of course the gut is very soft and will flatten out nicely. And then some final straightening and we're done. The crosses are really straight, just a couple nudges here or there. Very little straightening needed on these crosses. And that's it, we're all done. So there you have it, Tecnifibre T-Flash 300, the newer CES edition, which is a 100 square inch hoop, 16 by 19 pattern. Skips are 7 and 9 head, 7 and 9 throat. So it's a very common pattern. If you've been stringing for a while, it's nothing new or out of the ordinary at all. Mains start at the throat, mains tie off at the throat. Mains tie off at 8 throat, and your top cross ties off at 5 head and 10 throat. So there we have it. 56 pounds with 10% pre-stretch on the gut mains and 50 pounds on the polyester crosses. Thanks.